Normally, when I vote, I'm usually in and out. I get my paper, I cross it off, put it in the box, and I'm gone in under 5 minutes. This is the first election where I had to really, really think about who I was voting for. I was sitting at that table for probably 5 minutes. That's the longest I've ever sat at a polling booth. And I was undecided all the way up until I was sitting at that desk. But this is the first election where I've ever voted against someone and not for someone. Let me just say right off the bat, none of the people who have candidates running in most of the ridings deserve to win a majority. None of them. I have endorsed a minority, a conservative minority. We'll get into that in a minute. None of them. I'm not particularly proud of the person I voted for. I'm not proud of the party I voted for. I ended up voting for the Conservatives. And this is as an independent. And the reason I did it is because, look, the first thing I want to do is get this criminal out of office, the son of Satan. We can't have the son of Satan sitting on the throne of Canada for much longer. Otherwise, we just separate. Now, here's what I'm going to say after that. I've endorsed the minority. What I want to have happen, and I could have easily gone for the independent running in my riding, and if it was anyone else running, not someone of a satanic nature, anyone else, if it was Jean Chrétien, if it was Jody Wilson-Raybould, if it was Jane Philpott, if it was Paul Martin, if it was even Kathleen Wynne, any of them, if it was anyone else, I would have probably gone for the independent. But the so-called prime minister is so bad. He is so full of wickedness. He's a Mac Daddy. He's the head pimp. I mean, this guy, and when I say he's a pimp, he's pimped just about everybody in this country. He's pimped the environmentalists. He's pimped the political correct people. He's pimped the economic, the fiscal conservatives. He said the budget would be balanced. He pimped them out, too. He's pimped out the people who want electoral reform. He's pimped everyone out. He's conned all of them. He's a swift-foot Mac Daddy. And everybody's beginning to see it now. He's not going to get a majority. He could very well get a minority. And that could even be potentially just as bad. But, and I think that's actually probably where we're headed. But, you know, there's more people that hate him than don't hate him. But they're all divided. Now, what I hope to have happen is a conservative minority. Let the Conservatives get the most seats in all the provinces except Quebec. I want the Bloc Quebecois to get the most seats in Quebec. Now, having said that, I would never have voted PPC. That's never going to happen, never will happen. It didn't even cross my mind. The two people I was thinking of voting for was either the Conservative candidate or the independent running in my riding. He's a great guy. He's a friend of mine. You know what? Let him run again next time. If Scheer does stupidness, we will deal with Scheer. And we'll take those drastic measures of voting independent and all that stuff. But in the meantime, let's get the Mac Daddy out. We've got to get him out. We've got to get him out now. It's almost like you've got a bug in you. You've got a cancer in you. You've got diabetes in you. You've got something in your blood that needs to be taken out. And if it doesn't get dealt with quickly, it will spread and it will kill you. We have to get the cancer out before we start doing all this other, therapeutic stuff. I mean, when you go to the doctor, the first thing he's going to do is give you pills. Now, you guys know me. I'm against Big Pharma. I have it out for Big Pharma. I hate them. I'm a big believer in alternative medicine and all that stuff. But if you got something that's so bad, and on one hand, you've got the option of something that has a lot of bad side effects, but it's proven to deal with it in the short term, and you've got another option where you don't quite know how it's going to work. You've heard stories, but it may take slower and all this stuff. You know, your body's been dependent on drugs for so long that when you put some alternative stuff in you, it won't take as quick to kick in, and by then it could be too late. You know, deal with put the cancer in remission, put the diabetes in remission, and then you can take those drastic steps of alternative medicine and all that. Because when it is in remission, that's when you have more freedom to do all this stuff. So right now, we need to get the country's disease in remission. Get rid of the Mac Daddy. He could very well come back too, you know. But get rid of him now. Get rid of him now, and then we'll see what happens. We'll see how the health of the country is. If Scheer decides, look, I'm going to fight for more sensible immigration. I'm going to fight to get rid of the carbon tax. I'm going to fight to make sure life for Canadians is more affordable. I'm going to fight for all of this stuff. I'm going to make sure that it's not just Christians who are persecuted, but in the name of secularism. But all religions are persecuted equally. If we're going to have this whole secularism, let all the religions be dealt with equally. Then okay, fine. But if he does things like, you know, replace the carbon tax with another carbon tax, or, you know, does not bring in sensible immigration, you know, or you know, he's too Zionistic, he's too he's too subservient to the United States, then he's gonna get dealt with. He'll get dealt with, and we will discuss that when it happens. But right now, we have a cancer in us. Now, I'm endorsing Maxime Bernier to win in his riding. I don't want the PPC to win any other riding, but here's what I want. A conservative minority with the Bloc and Maxime as kingmakers. Now, here's why I'm saying this. And it's a strong minority, because it has to be a minority whereby the Liberals and the NDP and the Greens cannot form an alliance against the Conservatives. And they will never form an alliance with the Bloc, because the Bloc supports something called Bill 21 in Quebec, whereby they say that if you work for the Quebec government, you can't wear things on your head and religious things on your head and all that stuff. And I agree with it. I say that if Christians can get fired for saying Merry Christmas, then Muslims and Jews should face the same stuff that Christians face on a daily basis in this country. So, you know, let the Bloc and the PPC hold Andrew Scheer to account on certain issues. When it comes to the carbon tax, Maxime Bernier will make sure that Andrew Scheer gets rid of the carbon tax. But then the Conservatives will make sure that supply management is not touched, because that's more globalism for our dairy industry. That's not going anywhere if I have to say something about it. And that's the biggest reason why I didn't vote PPC. They're not nationalists. They're globalists. They're more globalists than any of them, actually. They are. You know, Maxime plays this game which, he's able to con white folk, but you can't con me, because I'm a lot smarter than people whose only concern is making sure there are no Muslims in the country. You know, if you say to me you're going to get rid of the immigrants, but then you're going to replace them with economic globalism, meaning a dairy industry from other countries, and drive our farmers out of business and on the street shining shoes, you're never going to get my vote. You're just as much of a globalist as the Liberals and the Conservatives put together, maybe even worse. So you're never going to get my vote. So that's out the window. But he can hold Andrew Scheer to account on other issues. Immigration, carbon tax, taxes in general, all those other stuff. The Bloc, they will make sure that Andrew Scheer doesn't do a complete slash and burn of the economy, you know, cutting this and cutting that, you know. But at the same time, I've always said this, Canucks, and this is something Canucks need to understand. And this is one of the things that John F. Kennedy said that I really like. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Stop voting for somebody who will do something for you. Stop relying on people to do things for you. Because when you rely on politicians and kings and this and that to do something for you, that's making it easier for them to control your life. Do it for yourself. You want pharmacare, you want all this stuff, get a job which has coverage, which has all this. I've always said, our politicians are too afraid of private sector. When you have a politician who's too afraid of the private sector, you should avoid that person like the plague. If you want pharmacare, we need to say to these companies, look, we'll get rid of your taxes and you bring in the pharmacare for your people, and people who are unemployed will get government-funded pharmacare. But don't tell me that as prime minister or as president, I'm going to do all this thing for you and it's going to be done for the government. Because that means you're controlling my life, and I don't want you to control my life. I think we should get rid of income tax. I think it's theft. But anyway, nobody deserves a majority. Let the Conservatives get a minority. We can count on them to lower taxes. We can hopefully count on them to get carbon taxes eliminated. And if we can't, let Maxime Bernier deal with Andrew Scheer. Let him deal with him. Andrew Scheer will make a very big mistake if he does anything, in terms of leaving carbon taxes here, or, sort of keeping it around, not really about, it's almost like, look at what's happening in England right now. You had Theresa May. Now, if Theresa May didn't have a minority of conservatives, she would have had such a very bad Brexit deal brought through the House of Commons, and the UK would have had a Brexit deal, which would have meant that they were better off in the EU than out of it. They would have been more enslaved outside of the EU from Europe than they were inside, because they would have had to follow all the regulations, but they wouldn't have even been able to have the voting power in EU. Might as well stay in EU then. If you're gonna have to follow all EU rules, but you don't have the power to vote in anything in EU, might as well stay in them. So the minority of DUP voters stopped Theresa from doing that. And the same thing will happen to Andrew Scheer if he does what Theresa did. He will be fired, and will bring someone in who will be like Boris Johnson, who will fight for the people economically, socially, etc., etc. So let him get a minority. Let's see how he fights. And if he does stupidness, then he's going to be removed very, very quickly. Arana Nation will make video after video after video on him. He's not going to like it. If you think I was tough on Justin, the tacky-headed, tire-faced, swift-foot Matt Daddy Trudeau, you ain't seen nothing yet. If Andrew goes in there and does stupidness, you ain't seen nothing yet. You guys need to stop taking Arana Nation for granted. Stop trying to think that I'm just a joke. We are rising in population and support every single month, every single week. We're not shrinking. We're rising. The voice is rising. And we're not just being listened to in Canada. We're being listened to in England, America, Europe, Australia, Africa. People listen to Arana Nation all over the place, and they do things. They stand up, they militarize themselves, they mobilize. When Arana Nation calls the word, they mobilize. So don't take us for a joke, Andrew. You see what happened to Theresa. You see what's happening to the Mac Daddy. You see what happened all over, even the Meghan Markle. Her popularity is going down. No, I'm not saying that's all me. The media also has, the honest media, which doesn't just slavishly go along with pop culture. But we all work together to get the word out to people. And we are rising in popularity. We're not shrinking. So let Andrew go out there and do foolishness with his minority. He won't last very long. And he'll be out, and we'll get someone else who can do it, and then we'll fight for him to get the majority. But if Andrew wants to keep his job, if Andrew wants to keep his reputation and not go the way of Theresa, he will make sure that he puts the people first. He does what he says he's going to do, and he doesn't do it in a way that's tricking us. because we're watching him. Theresa thought she could trick the British people with a bad Brexit deal. She wasn't able to do it. She's out there herding cattle now, wherever she is in her village or something now. And Boris is in there, and he's very popular, despite what the media says. If there was an election, he'd get a majority. So in the meantime, this is the Arana Nation.